Hello and welcome to this week's podcast for Iconic Wealth for Women. If you know me, you know that I love getting people to think outside the box. And this week's episode is going to be no different to any other. You see, I'm slowly being introduced more and more to the mergers and acquisition market, but for small business owners like you and I. You see, the failure rate for starting a small business, especially in the UK, is over 60% in the first 3 years. And an alternative to this is to looking at buying an existing business rather from starting from scratch. And today I'm joined with the wonderful Della Kirkman. Della's a certified public accountant who started her business journey as a waitress in Indiana. She went from a 4-star server at Cracker Barrel to financial freedom through entrepreneurship acquisition entrepreneurship. She got that right. She bought a small tax practice where she was originally working in, and she hired a team and grew it from there. She became a partner, grew the practice, and then sold it to focus on creating wealth for other women through acquisition. I love that she rides a Harley. I've got a soft spot because she's a Harley rider. Coming from Australia, I grew up around Harleys, and it's one of the things I really miss in the UK is that rolling sound of them down the road as they roll out of an area. She's planning to do an iron butt challenge, and we're going to talk more about that shortly. And that's just for fun, business promotion, and also to raise money for ovarian cancer research. Della, welcome. I'm really excited by your story. I'm excited that you're part of the Iconic Wealth for Women book as well. So if you haven't tuned into the book yet, whether you're watching this episode before or after it's out, we have a book collaboration where 18 women are sharing their expertise, how they've grown their wealth. And I love that Della is part of that book. So thank you so much for joining us from the US, Della. So do you want to share a little bit about kind of your story, how you got started, and why you're a little bit passionate about acquiring businesses rather than starting them from scratch?
Well, hey, Kylie, I'm so happy to be here this morning. You make my story sound super interesting, and it's fun that you brought up the Iron Butt Challenge because that'll be a fun one to talk about as well. But I've always been interested in money, probably because my grandparents talked about it a lot, and there was a lot of just money activities in our family, whether it's dividing up the piggy bank or bringing in the cattle for, 50 cents to put in the pocket. They were grandparents that always gave money at birthdays and Christmas, so we always had money. My great-grandparents gave me a CD, gave all the kids a CD. So I learned about interest and how I was letting the bank use my money and they were going to pay me in exchange for that. And so in second grade, I was raised by a single mom, but in second grade, I was loaning my mother money with interest, to help her get by from week to week as she was trying to make ends meet as well. So I've always been interested in money. So I think it's a really fun thing to talk about. And I think it's great for women to be more interested in money, especially at an early age, because as we all know, women live so much longer than men. And one way or another, we end up alone in the world, so to speak, or in charge of our own finances. And that should not be a scary, unfortunate, tragic event. That should be an empowering event that we can take advantage of.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. My favorite topic is money, and people cringe. And it's like, I love it, especially in the UK. We're very posh and proper over here, and money is taboo. But you've touched on something really important there, because the statistic is one in the UK is 1 in 3 women still rely on their partners for funding, for finance completely, for their whole lives to be covered. And like you said, I know statistically for retirement, it's 1 in 4 in retirement are going to be in poverty in the UK. So we need to change that. So I love that you have a passion for changing that education as well. So tell me a bit about kind of your journey to going from being a waitress in Indiana to having your first business. Kind of take me through some of that story.
Well, I'd always done a lot of entrepreneurial type things. I've always worked for commission. Over here in the States, waiting tables is almost all tips. So most of the income that you make is by, we'll say, the generosity of the people that you wait on, because they're going to pay you as much or as little as they think that you're worth during that interaction. And there are guidelines, but there's nothing set in stone. So I've done lots of entrepreneurial things. My original degree was in finance and economics, but life came along, lots of things happened. So I did end up being a single mom with 2 little girls waiting tables. My degree was in finance and economics. I strayed away from as many of the accounting classes as I could because those were my least favorite classes in school. So that's kind of ironic. But when my daughter got to the point where she was going to be in school all day, I thought, okay, it's probably time, to get a real job again. Even though waiting tables did exactly what it needed for us at that point in time. And so as I looked through all the help wanted ads, all the interesting jobs either required an MBA, which I didn't have, or a CPA. And you probably have more knowledge about it than I did at the time. But I thought, hey, I'm a really good test taker. I'll just take a test and become a CPA. Well, that's not exactly how it works, but I did manage to kind of squeeze it out in that fashion. I didn't have enough credits in general, even with my double major, and I didn't have enough accounting credits to be eligible to even take the exam, which is actually 4 exams. So I did have to go back to college and take a couple more classes. But in the meantime, I reached out to my email addresses, just friends and family, and said, hey, I'm going to be an accountant now. And if you know anybody that needs accounting help, I just want to get some experience. And my aunt, who was like 80, 85 years old at the time, the least person I expected to respond back said, hey, you should come in, to where I get my taxes done, and there might be a spot for you there. And so that's what I did. I started out as temporary tax season help, doing drop-offs in the back, which basically means you sit back there by yourself, do the data entry. You don't have to know a lot, thank goodness, because I didn't have any real tax experience at that point in time. I had done a few returns for my brother's friends in exchange for alcohol, and that was pretty much the extent of my tax experience. But that ended up being just the perfect place for me. The owner fell during that first week that I worked there. Actually, it was the first day and never came back that whole tax season. And so we all just worked together. His small team worked together and really saved his practice for him. So I made it known, with all of his health issues, that I would be interested in buying. I'm in an interview right now, babe.
You can tell we're live, people.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And so I just let it be known that I wanted to buy the practice, and it didn't work out exactly that way. I can go into all the details, but what did end up happening is that another CPA ended up buying his practice because the two practices were really tied together, sharing overhead and phone numbers and fax line and all those good things. So the other gentleman did not want to lose control of those things, but he didn't actually want a second practice. And so he came to me and asked me if I would run the practice for him if he purchased it. And I said, I would really love to do that, but I want to do that as an owner and not as an employee. And I was upfront. I said, I don't have a lot of credit. I don't have any cash to put into this, but I'm a really hard worker. I want to learn. And I'd already proven that I was good with the clients and had a lot of other things that I could bring to the practice. And so he came back and offered me a 51% ownership in exchange for being the face of and running the practice. So that's how that got started.
I love that. I think there's a couple of key things that come out of that for me as well, is that, you weren't scared to ask for help in the first place. I love that your aunt was one that come forward. It's like you said, whenever you're in business or whenever you're doing things, sometimes you put things out there and you don't know who. We have a perception, don't we, of who might help or who might get involved. And actually quite often it's the one that you least expect. So I've done a lot of property fundraising and raising funds for property deals and things like that. And it's always the people you don't expect. But the key thing there is asking for help. A lot of women don't ask for help. They don't put it out there. We were just joking about trying to get J.K. Rowling into our book launch. And someone said to me, I can't believe you asked her. And it's like, well, why wouldn't I? So I love that go-to attitude of just asking for help and making it happen. And then also the belief you had in yourself. So how do you instill that belief? The belief that you kind of, look, I don't have this experience. I don't have this, but I want this. Could you kind of touch a bit more on that? Like, what gave you that kind of drive to know there was more in you, I guess, that you wanted more?
I don't know how that comes about. I mean, I was raised out in the country. I had a lot of freedom to experiment. I was given a lot of responsibility. I don't know if that comes naturally or if, like you said, you can instill that in someone. But one of my first memories is we had horses and cattle and, other livestock. But I remember I was like 3 years old and someone saddled up the pony, because I certainly couldn't do that on my own, and handed him to me. And I pulled him up to a stump on the patio to get on. But I was riding this pony by myself, but he immediately took me into the yard and threw me off. And it wasn't like, oh, tragedy, you got thrown. I was like, ah, ha, ha, get up and do it again. So I don't know. I guess it was maybe, some of the environment that I was raised in, but no one ever told me that I couldn't. And it never really occurred to me, I guess, that I couldn't.
Oh, I love that. And I think that we talked about, we're going to talk more about your daughter in a minute around becoming a role model. But I love that. And I think it's quite interesting because being Australian, living in the UK, I grew up like that as well. So, and I grew up with horses, funnily enough. But we always used to say, my mum used to put the nappies on the horses before she did us.
Yeah.
Horses always come first. It was always, they were first, we were second. But again, it's that instilling that courage that, you can fail and it's okay to fail, because it's not failure. It's just like you said, you learn something, you get up and you go and do it again. So I really, really love that. So when you got offered this position, then kind of what changed in relation to your journey from there? So when you got offered the partnership, where did you take it next? What happened next?
Well, it was kind of a miracle, so to speak. It was, and that's the beauty of buying a business. So, when you start from scratch, it takes a long time to become successful. If you ever do become successful, the startup path usually means, you're not going to have any income for an extended period of time, probably 18 months or so, if not longer than that. You have to come up with money to get into the business and get that started. And where in this acquisition situation, I stepped into a paycheck that was larger than what I was already making waiting tables. Plus there was profit left over at the end of the year. And all of the payments for the business came out of the business itself as well. So, and it happens frequently, but, I walked in and day one, I immediately improved my situation tremendously.
Oh, I love that. And a lot of people don't think about it in relation to, like, I talk to women all the time, like you said, that are in their businesses, they're working on it, and they don't think about the cash flow situation. Like you said, when you're buying a business, ideally, if you're buying the right type of business, they've already got cash flow going. It's like you said, you're not starting from ground zero, which is really, really powerful. So I really love that. So startup, no income, cash flow, changing your own situation, and then obviously going into the acquisition. So when you got into that situation, so I know you've gone on and done other things since then. So what kind of led you to going from obviously being in it, running that business really successfully, and then I know you turned around and sold that, didn't you? You sold a share. Did you buy him out first?
Yeah, I bought my partner out first. That was kind of always something that had been mentioned, that I could buy him out at some point in time. And as I said, he didn't really want this second business. He wanted control of the phone number and the fax line and the office space and such, which I was fine with because, I didn't have anything else going on, so to speak, at that point in time. So I kind of look at those people on Shark Tank, or you guys have what, Dragon's Den or something over there? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, take any one of those offers, because that's the experience. It doesn't have to be what you do for the rest of your life, but get in there with somebody that already knows what they're doing and already has that success, that's willing to help you along. And that's exactly what happened with this particular situation. He already had been running a successful practice. And so there was never a question of, oh my gosh, what do I do next? I just do whatever Doug would do, not what would Jesus do, it's what would Doug do.
I love that. But it's really powerful. I do sit there sometimes going, why would you not take some of those offers? I do watch them going, are you crazy? But again, it's that mentality, isn't it? That I think we get so attached to quite often what we do or what we're creating or what we're building that we think it's going to be forever. And I think that, when I watch, like you said, Dragon's Den and people like that, it's like you said, they're coming on with their precious baby, aren't they? And it's like, they can't let go. And it's like, hello, like these guys have got years of experience of doubling, tripling where you want to go. So I love that you embrace that. That must have been quite a bit daunting, going from like suddenly going from a waitress to owning your business outright, the responsibility. So I hear some people shy away from the responsibility of other people's salaries and those sorts of things of growing. What happens if I grow? Will I lose my lifestyle? So have you got anything in relation to kind of your thoughts around that? Like, what was the shift and the change for you? Or was it just really exciting?
It was just really exciting. I mean, it's a team effort. You have to expect things from the team members as well. I mean, you don't just hand out jobs, so to speak. They have to, be able to work for that job and provide, the services and the level of expectations. But I had a super great team, and I built the team up over that point in time. But I love having jobs and thinking that I created those jobs for people. And I think I've created a really excellent work environment. It happened to be all moms as well. And our thing was, tax practice is very deadline oriented. So there were obviously things had to be done and they had to be done at the right time. And there's no exceptions to that rule. But at the same time, I let everybody come and go at the office as they pleased. And what I told them is, you'll never miss a kid's doctor's appointment or a school play because of work, because we can schedule around that. But if you want to use work as your excuse to get out of that child's play, feel free. But, as long as the work gets done, come in early, come in later, come in on the weekend. Someone needs to always be in the office. But besides that, as long as the deadlines get met, you come and go pretty much as you please, and do not let this take precedence over your children and your family.
Oh, I love that. What an incredible culture. It's interesting. I talk to a lot of philanthropists here, and it's like, how can you do good with business? And I really love that you do that naturally, and you probably don't label it as that sort of thing, but giving back and helping mums that can have that flexibility is a part of that change. It's a part of doing business that creates good for other people at the same time. So well done you. Like, I didn't know anything about that. Brilliant. So and then you sold it. So you've sold your practice, haven't you? And now what are you doing? Like, what's sort of the next steps for Della? What have you been doing since?
Yeah, so the next steps are to preach the gospel of acquisition entrepreneurship, especially for women. And what I find, I do a lot of in-person marketing, networking in my area. And when I mention the fact that, hey, pretty much anybody can buy a business and buying a business can solve almost all of your problems, it comes across as quite shocking to people. They had never thought that they could buy a business. It's not on anybody's radar. So mission one is to get that on the radar, especially for women, but to get that on the radar for everyone.
Yeah, cool. So what holds, especially women, what holds them back from buying a business?
I think most people, once it even does occur to them, they think that it's very expensive, and surely they must have a giant pile of money or giant connections to be able to make that happen. And I don't think they realize that it can be much simpler. I'll give you another example. So we also bought and sold a pizza pub. We don't usually use the term pub over here, but I've gotten to use that since I interact with so many lovely people in the UK. But when we sold that pub, we sold it to a server that had worked for us. And I think this is pretty interesting because they, again, didn't have, a lot of credit or a lot of cash build up. But her boyfriend had a fencing company. So he did, like privacy fences and such. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we found them a nice size fencing job, and they did that in exchange for the down payment on buying our business. So they did the fencing job. The $10,000 that they charged for that went directly into our pockets, and that served as their down payment.
Wow. So you kind of raise the funds in a unique way for their business to actually fund their purchase. I love that. What a creative way of doing things. I think that's the thing with these sorts of things, isn't it? It's thinking outside the box in relation to what you can do. When I used to work in real estate, a lot of the times, listening to people moving, why they're moving. And I know when you're talking to business owners and things like that, they don't sometimes have to sell immediately. Like you said, there's ways of creatively exiting the business because they've got a life plan. They've got an idea of where they want to go, why they want to go there. And it's like, I think that's the most important thing, getting to their why and understanding why they're doing what they're doing. We see a lot of the stuff at the moment coming through where there's no succession planning anymore. A lot of their kids don't want their businesses. So there's a huge opportunity in the UK market at the moment to buy up businesses where they thought their kids would want them, or they're
calling that the silver tsunami.
Is that what they call it?
I call
Silver
it the silver
tsunami.
tsunami with all of the baby boomers retiring.
Oh, I love that silver tsunami. I've not heard that one yet. And it is, and there's a massive opportunity for that where people have built up all this trust, they've built up all these businesses, and they thought they would hand them over to their kids, but there's no exit strategy, there's no planning for leaving their businesses. So if someone's thinking about maybe acquiring a business, maybe they've got past that kind of education gap and think, oh, this sounds exciting. Where would they start? Where would they go and start to think about even acquiring a business?
Well, the easiest place is just to start looking at the listings that are online. That may not be a business they end up buying, but practice makes perfect. And there's a lot of practice that goes into buying a business because it's very unlikely that you're going to buy the first business that you come across or that you look at or even that you do due diligence on. So the first step would be just looking at listings on Biz Buy Sell is what we have over here, one of the most common ones, and just see what's available, get an idea of what's out there, get an idea of the price tags on these things. But when you get really serious about buying a business, the next thing I would do is just go into your own Rolodex, if we even still use that word anymore, but pull out your phone and send everybody a text or an email and said, hey, I'm looking to buy a business. If you know of anybody that has one for sale, and you might be surprised at what you can find just within your own internal network.
That's a good idea. I wouldn't have even thought about doing that. It's the little things, isn't it? It's always our network first. We really underestimate the power of our network quite often,
Yes,
don't we?
definitely.
It's the first overlooked thing, isn't it? So I really love that. So when you're thinking about due diligence and things like that, what are you looking for in a business? Like, I know there's obviously a massive complex sort of, I guess there's a complexity behind buying a business, but what sort of things are you starting to look for that might make a business a great thing to buy?
Well, I'll say, every business is for sale for a reason. There's some kind of problem inherent in the business or the situation. And so don't shy away from that. That doesn't need to be a deal breaker, but what you need to find is the business that lacks whatever you have.
Okay. Yeah.
So you mentioned, we talked about the silver tsunami or the older people retiring and selling their businesses. Probably those businesses do not have any technology or very minimal technology. So if you can bring that to the business, that can be what you have to offer. Maybe you do have capital and you come across a business that just does need capital, or maybe you have the marketing skills and that past owner doesn't have those marketing skills. That's what you bring. So that's one of the things you need to figure out is what exactly do you bring to the table, and then look for a business that's missing your particular skills and assets.
Oh, that's a really nice way to look at it, isn't it? And it makes me think that's why I'm looking at a marketing agency for myself, because it's like I can bring the clients. I've got hundreds of clients that come to me on a regular basis that need marketing in some way, shape, or form. So I'm on the hunt for someone that doesn't like selling their services,
Yes.
because I can sell their services really easily. They just want to get on with doing the work. So I hadn't even thought about what I'm actually doing, but that's what I'm looking at. So and what about funding? So, you talked about how you got involved. Obviously, you got involved by running the business at the time. So you were obviously in the business and then took over a share of it. What other sort of funding opportunities are there if someone sort of said, look, I want to buy a business, but I really don't have the funds? Like, what sort of opportunities are there to step in?
So there's, back to your network, you could borrow from friends and family. That's one of the most common and probably easily accessible sources of funds. But over here in the States, we have the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and those are government-backed loans. And so those are relatively easy to get, and they require a 10% down payment. But that 10% down payment could actually be seller financing. So that seller of the business could actually, provide that down payment for you. And then, maybe you could do a fencing job. I mean, there are really all kinds of ways that you can get into a business. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but the key is really figuring out what that seller wants. And it's not retirement strictly. I mean, that might be the words that they use initially, but it's not just retirement. And it's probably not necessarily, a giant stack of cash either. There's something more to it that they want. So I was consulting with someone a few months back, and the business they were buying was mostly because the seller was a female seller and her husband was going into a nursing home. And so she needed funds for that nursing home. And so I suggested to the buyer, maybe you can find a way to cover that nursing home payment, You don't have to have the hundreds or millions of dollars, but what she really needs is to be able to pay for that particular payment. That was her goal in selling her business. So if she could arrange it so that her payment for the business at least covered the seller's payment for that nursing home, then they might be able to work out some kind of a deal. So, whatever you can dream up and whatever you can get someone to agree to is a possibility, but you really have to find out what their true motivation is.
Oh, I love that. We used to talk a lot about that in property. It's finding out their real kind of why, what's their real need, because that's when you can get creative with deals as well. So it sounds very similar. It's interesting. I know more than I thought I did
Yes,
about buying a property. It's really interesting starting to think about it creatively. It opens up the way you think about things, doesn't it? Because the amount of times I did property deals and real estate where we were like, okay, maybe we could fund it through this bit, or, we don't have to get the deposit funded. We could get them to fund the deposit to get the deal through. It's like, because then they can pay it out of the payments once it's through. So, it's good. You've got my brain going now, definitely for sure. So,
excellent.
So where can it go wrong? Where can it go wrong? What sort of things can happen? What sort of pitfalls are we looking at? Do you have any stories of where it's gone wrong, or anyone that you know where it's gone seriously wrong?
Yeah, well, things can always go wrong, that's for sure. And I what I'm stressing right now is that, the deal gets all the attention. So everybody wants to talk about, how much are we going to pay for the business, or how much are we going to make from selling the business? How are those payments going to be made? That's kind of the exciting part that gets all the attention. But where a lot of the problems come in and people don't focus enough attention is on that transition. So transitioning the business from one owner to the new owner deserves much more respect, attention, and upfront planning than what I've seen it be given. And so when I bought my practice, it was super smooth transition. It couldn't have been any better. The previous owner stayed on as an employee. He was super helpful. He had so much knowledge in his head that wasn't documented. And so it was great to have him around. So I'm like, oh, so-and-so is coming in. What do you know about them that's not in the file? Oh, yeah, ask them about their kids that, do this, or, whatever. He just had all that inside information. Some of it was personal. Yep. Some of it, was related to the business itself. But I just got spoiled with that transition. And so when I sold my practice, I was very naive and thought it would just automatically go the same way, but it was absolutely the exact opposite. I won't go into a lot of details, but I should have been very specific about how I wanted that transition, and I should have stipulated that up front, especially in this type of thing. It was very relationship based, and I had every intention of staying on and being, that mascot, making all those introductions, being in a lot of those first meetings, and just really a smooth handover, so to speak. And it didn't happen that way. And it made me sad. It made my clients sad. So I learned that lesson the hard way, but I would say definitely the transition needs to be given much more thought and attention than most people do.
Brilliant. I love that. Because again, it is like you said, you still care about the business, you still care about the staff and everything. By the sound of it, you built up an incredible culture. So I can imagine it would have been, even though you wanted to sell it, it still would have been a hard process to sell it, because you've obviously built such a good reputation with your team and your staff and everything like that, to then hand it over to someone else.
It was hard.
Yeah, and making that transition. So I love that. So in relation to kind of the transition, what's 2 or 3 things, if they're thinking about doing it, what's 2 or 3 things that they need to look for? What do they need to think about to make it a much smoother process?
The transition itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, as a buyer, I would make sure you're getting the training that you need. Make sure that you're getting some hands-on time with that particular owner. And depending on how relationship based, have that owner really be the cheerleader for you. One way to do that is to have some type of seller financing involved, so that your success equals the seller's success as well. If you're not successful, they're not as successful either. Yep. So tie some of your success into the payments that they're going to be receiving.
Oh, I love that. I do some of that with my clients the other way. So it's like I help them grow, but I get a percentage as they grow. So again, reverse engineering, it's really interesting. So in relation to kind of your next step, so obviously you're wanting to help some more people get involved with this. I love to kind of, I guess, shift that thinking and the belief around, having a business for life. So if you are, especially I think women, we get attached to what we do. What sort of things can we do to think about kind of like for me at the moment, it's interesting. I didn't get into this until now. I'm over 50 now, and I sort of started to realize that, hey, I can create pots of money for my retirement. And that's what I look at is like, where can I create another pot of money that gives me another retirement pot? In relation to kind of that, where do you see yourself in relation to businesses? Like, how do you encourage women to maybe take that step to go, look, a business doesn't have to be life, but you can step out and become a CEO. Or like you said, how can you step out of your business more? Because I see so many women in business creating a business that just lives around them. How do they step up and take that CEO role like you did in relation to kind of going from being an employee or being in a business to then running a business successfully and stepping out of it?
It's super hard. That's for sure.
I love your honesty. I love your honesty. Yeah,
it is. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I sold my practice is I wasn't able to get it to the point where it could run on its own, so to speak. Now, a lot of it did, a lot of aspects of it did. But I knew I had gotten it to a point where I needed to either go big or go home, so to speak. And so when I listed my business for sale, I wasn't even sure that it would sell. Again, I didn't have that particular type of experience at that point in time. I didn't know how easily it would sell. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. So there, a lot of extra factors going on at that point in time. But I thought, I'm just going to throw it out there and give it a shot. And if it does sell, perfect. I get to move on and do the next thing. And if it doesn't, then I'll just have to know that I have to get in there and work harder to work myself out of the business. But the real money is made in capital events. So the true money is not made just by having a successful business and running it on a day-to-day basis. The real money is made, when you sell those items and at the capital events.
So if you do sell a business and you have a capital event, what do you do with it? What's your wealth tip in relation to kind of, because that's what I'm looking at. So I love creating pots of money. It's something that for me, it was a eye-opener to go, oh, actually, I'd rather have that now because I can do stuff with it. Because now I know my investment strategies. I know what I'm doing for growth. I create more passive income. So what's your tip around building wealth, around buying and selling businesses? Why should you do it?
Well, one of my tips is that from the seller's perspective, sellers don't often think of this. We talked about the transition, but from the seller's perspective, there's also the transition into what do you do next? Because now you're not a business manager, you need to become a money manager. And so that needs to be given a lot of upfront thought, and you have to study and get educated just like you did, when running your business.
Fantastic.
So you have to look at it as a whole nother role that you're taking on, is now you're a money manager, and give that the serious effort that it deserves.
Brilliant. And talking about growing long-term wealth, because obviously that's one of the missions of Iconic Wealth for Women, is to get women to start to think about, rather than just their average income, but thinking about long-term wealth. So thinking about the strategy to go, look, how do I take into account some of that wealth now for my future? So have you got any kind of advice around kind of shifting that thinking as well, to rather than everyone's short-term focused, it's how do you create some of that long-term focus at the moment in relation to kind of developing and growing your wealth? What sort of things should they be looking for?
One of the things that we always do is we keep cash handy for opportunities. Everybody talks about having the emergency fund. So if the bad things come up, you have money available for that. But we always like to keep cash handy for those opportunities that come up.
Oh, I love that. So being ready to take advantage of it. It's interesting. One of the headlines this morning was that the property market's going to drop by at least another 10% the next month. And I was like, oh, maybe I might better get another one in there. So again, it's opportunities, isn't it? It's having the cash flow. Cash is king for that sort of thing, for sure. I love it, Della. It's been absolutely fabulous. Della, do you want to share anything specific around your kind of, I guess, buying business journey now? Anything else you'd like to add around what you're doing at the moment?
Well, I'm working on building an education and media company to spread that gospel of acquisition entrepreneurship. So I do have a free newsletter. It's a little on the spicy side. We ride motorcycles and we use a few cuss words, and we like to drink a little bit of Crown. But it's kind of a fun newsletter, but it has really great, solid information explained in an easy to understand way. And I'm getting a lot of great feedback from that. You mentioned the Iron Butt Challenge. That's a 1,000-mile ride within 24 hours. So it's a real, actual, challenge on a motorcycle. But I'm hoping to use it as, kind of a little attention grabber for the business, as well as you said, raising funds for ovarian cancer. So you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn and see if you can participate in that as well.
Brilliant. I love that. I can't wait to see you do that. I think that, one of the things I notice when I come to the UK is they don't get distance.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you said 100 miles, they're like, hang on, that's like across England and back, and like 3 times you'd be in the water if you did that here. So
yeah, the US is big though.
Exactly. It's like coming from Australia. It's like, well, that's not even to the next state. Do you know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, so I'm used to distances, but when you said that, I know a couple of girls messaged me, went, oh my God, cringe. Like, that's even more across than the whole country. So I can't wait to see that happen. And obviously we'll support you in the community as much as we can in relation to what you're doing there, because I love things like that. I think that, part of the community is to inspire women to kind of, like you said, get involved, because one of my biggest sayings is always, if good women earn good money, they do good things. It's simple as that. We give back, we get involved with the community, we do things. So I really love that. And I have to ask you, like, one of the things we do in this podcast when we ask people to come on and get their information is we ask them something fun and interesting. And I have to share yours. You said you had a goat I milked every day before and after school, and we had goat milk ice cream. So one of your jobs was being on the farm, obviously in the morning, was getting out there and milking the goat. What's your favorite ice cream then? Did you flavor it and things like that as well?
No, we didn't. It was kind of extra sweet naturally. The thing about goats, though, is that their milk tastes like whatever they eat. And, goats do like to eat everything. So we had a lot of pine trees lining our property, and we had to make sure, because you don't want pine flavored ice cream. It might sound fun at Christmas time, but you got to keep the goats away from the pine trees.
So you fed the goats the flavor that you wanted for the milk.
Right,
for the ice cream.
kind of along those lines.
I love that. I mean, that's a part of my goal in relation to the fact that I grew up on farms and land in Australia, and a lot of people just don't get that sort of mentality. So I really love that. So thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, Della, where's the best place to connect? Obviously, there's going to be links around this video, or if you're tuning into the actual podcast, there'll be links to connect. But where do you hang out the most? Where should they come and see you?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Facebook. Find me on either one of those under my full name, Della Kirkman.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope, ladies of the Iconic Wealth community and people tuning into watching this, that you've been inspired to think outside the box. So that's my goal with this, is to start to get you thinking differently about building your long-term wealth, increasing your income, and just changing that money story. There's opportunities like this all around us. It's just taking that step to embrace them. So Della, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. And if you're, like I said, tuning into the book, please do make sure there should be a book link somewhere around this video by now. Make sure you go across, buy the book, read the stories, get inspired by the women that are sharing their wealth. There's a lot of knowledge coming out of the Iconic Wealth for Women book. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kylie. You're the best.
Thank you.